Hope everybody is doing well. It's time for another online dinner party, and I know that I've got a few guests that are here with me today, but we're going to have a fun conversation, learn about them, learn what they've got going on, and all in that fun nature. It definitely is always good inviting people over as if you were having a regular dinner party. Of course, that would involve having a house instead of an apartment, which is where I currently live, and all along those lines. And of course, it might help if there was actually a place of neatness, but definitely I am not in that place. So maybe I'll get a house one of these days and can actually have a authentic dinner party where folks can come and all along those lines and actually have some food and have some drinks and all along those lines. But until that happens, I love having these online dinner parties where I get to meet amazing people and all in that way. As I was telling Sandy earlier, who is one of my guests, I was actually checking out some of the basketball scores because this is definitely March Madness. March Madness is about to begin because I know that on Sunday they will be announcing the field of 64, and I'm hoping that my alma mater, Marquette, will get a top seed. They've been on that line in bracketology between a 2 and a 3 seed. Don't think that they'll get a number 1 seed. That'll probably belong to Connecticut, which is also in the Big East and which is the defending champion. So they will probably be the number 1 seed, or at least one of the number 1 seeds. And I know that Carolina, because I am here in the heart of ACC country where we've got both Carolina and Duke, they will probably have a top seed, maybe even a 1 or 2 themselves. But like I said, when I looked at bracketology, it looked like Marquette was going to be a 2 or 3 seed. And then, of course, a lot of people have been paying attention to politics, speaking of seeds and all along those lines. And it looks like we've got the 2 candidates that will be going up against each other, both the current president against the former president. So both of them have sealed up their respective nominations, and we will see what goes on in that space, even though there are some people that are looking for a third-party candidate, hoping that there will be a third-party candidate. I know that even here on this network, we've got some people that are behind no labels. So definitely it'll be interesting to see if they play the role of spoiler, or maybe this will be the first time in history that we get somebody that isn't a Democrat or Republican winning, even though I'm thinking that the odds of that are probably long to none. But that's just my guess as I'm thinking about the nature of politics and the nature of the political system and all in that way. And then as far as the weather, well, I've been doing one of my other jobs, which is scoring test papers. And I was doing that for a assessment company. And I was thinking to myself, daggone it, I'm in the house. I should be outside because there's lovely weather that's going on the outside. So I should probably be out there. But the kids will not get their work. They like the term scoring versus grading. If I am outside, even though I guess I could take the computer out, but there would probably be all those distractions from Mother Nature and all along those lines. So that being the case, I was not going to be on the outside enjoying this fine weather because I think that we're like in the high 70s or maybe the mid to high 70s. And I'm curious to find out how the weather is where folks are and where they are coming from and all along those lines. And then, like I said, as one of those people that has a multitude of jobs, later on this evening, as a matter of fact, after this show, I'll be going to the Hayti Heritage Center, which is an African American cultural arts center. Today, it'll be a yoga class. That's right, because ballet was yesterday, and on Monday, there was African dance for women. And definitely those are the 3 classes, since they have yoga taught by a different teacher on Thursday. And we just completed our film festival. So that was very good. Matter of fact, next year will be our 30th anniversary. Hard to believe because I've been involved pretty much since the beginning. That next year will be 30 years of doing this particular film festival, now called the Hayti Heritage Film Festival. In the past, it's been called the Black Diaspora Film Festival, and it's had some other names as well. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what goes on in that space, because we've had some amazing people that have come both to the Hayti Center as well as to the film festival. As a matter of fact, this year we had Omar Dorsey from Queen Sugar, and we had the young lady that was one of the producers, Lisa Cortez, if I'm remembering names correctly, that did Precious, but she also did some other films, including the film that's out now about Little Richard, the great musician, and all along those lines. So definitely it was good to have those people in the house. And in the past, we've had people like my good friend Ronnie Warner, who did This Christmas, Cedric Pendleton from the House of Pain, and definitely others that have been to the center, whether it was for the film festival or other things. Matter of fact, way back when we had Dick Gregory as a guest, I think that was in the 4th year of the film festival, and there have been other both filmmakers and actors, and even this year we had filmmakers from around the country that came in. I don't think we had any international filmmakers, even though we've had that in the past, at least not that I can recall and all in it that way, at least not this particular year. But like I said, the Hayti Heritage Center has had the pleasure of having performers like Roberta Flack come into the building, Angelique Kidjo, and that was part of Art of Cool, Regina Carter, as well as way back when Ruby Dee was doing her one-woman play, My One Good Nerve. And we know sometimes even in relationships, folks can get on that one good nerve. And ironically, her husband of that time, and they have both passed on, Ossie Davis, came and surprised her for their anniversary. So that was a very pleasant thing that took place several years ago that I remember, and all along those lines. So that's just some of the things going on in my world. Like I said, I'm gonna bring in my very amazing guests, and I've got some amazing folks that are gonna come in and share a little bit of their thoughts of a number of things. So like I said, we've got a house full, and that's always a good thing to have at a dinner party. But I'm gonna start off with my first guest, that being Sandy. And Sandy has got some things going on in her world. I'm already jealous because in the background, she's got a hot air balloon. And that has always been one of the things that I had wished to do, but I don't have the courage to do it. Kind of like skydiving, because I've had friends that skydive. And I think that a plane is designed to take you from point A to point B, and I see no good reason to fall out of a plane. But the hot air balloons do look appealing and all along those lines. So I see that artwork in your back, and I'm going like, I wonder if Sandy's ever gone on a hot air balloon ride, because it looks fun, and that has been on my wish list and everything, even though I have yet to do it.
So Mark, I haven't either yet. It is on my list. I've always loved hot air balloons. I love watching them, but I haven't been on one yet. So I keep it here as my reminder. It's like next up on the list. I just need to make the time to do it.
Yep. Well, I know one of your organizations, and I love this idea. I kind of mentioned it earlier, and one of the things that the network talks about is whether we are using enough of our brain power. And I know that your organization is called BrainWorks for Life and everything. And I've heard studies where people say that even whether it comes to the special powers that we have, some people would call it ESP, some people would call it some of the other things that are in our abilities to do, that we don't maximize what we can do even with our brain. I think they say that we use like about 10% of what we can actually do, and that we are just as good as those computers that we have on our hands and on our devices, because sometimes the computers are also on our watches and in our wrists on a regular system. But I've heard a lot of people say that we don't use enough of our brain power. But as the founder and the CEO of BrainWorks for Life, I was wondering your take on that. Do we use enough?
Well, first of all, you're old like I am. And so we remember when they talked about computers and that there were memory leaks. We had to shut them down, give them a rest, reset, because there's memory leaks. Well, the same thing can happen to us after a while with our brains. We can develop memory leaks. So yeah, we don't use all the power of our brain, but that's why it's so important to take care of our brains and give it the nutrients it needs and really facilitate good brain health. So one of the things I wanted to talk about for a bit, because this is March, not only March Madness, but it's also Brain Injury Awareness Month. And so if it's okay, I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about concussions and concussion care, because there's, I think, a lot of people who really don't understand what a concussion can do to us and what we need to do to heal. As an example, I had my first concussion probably 30 years ago. And at that point in time, there was just no information. And I didn't know what I know now. And so when I went to the doctor with the brain fog and the pain in my head and the pain in my neck and the, all of that, they really didn't have anything to say other than, here, take some muscle relaxants. That didn't help heal my brain. They were trying to get the muscles to relax, but it didn't help heal my brain. So one of the things that people don't know, don't understand in general, is that the brain and the gut are connected. Right. So there's a connection via the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body. So when someone has a head injury, whether it's from a concussion, a whiplash, a sporting injury, whatever it is, within 3 days, that person will have 98% of people end up with digestive issues. So now not only do we have, and that is because when there's a shock to the brain through the vagus nerve, the shock travels down to the digestive system.
Mhm.
So now not only do we have inflammation or swelling in the brain, but we also have inflammation in the gut, which leads to leaky gut, if you've heard that term, and we can talk about that in a minute, but leaky gut, which allows toxins and, things that shouldn't be there into the bloodstream, that goes back up to the brain, as well as traveling back up through the vagus nerve again. But there's multiple ways then. This inflammation can get back up to the brain, which keeps the gut inflamed, which keeps the brain inflamed. So at a time when we want all of the inflammation to go down in the brain, we've got this cycle going that doesn't allow us to heal as quickly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Sandy, along those same lines, I was just wondering your thoughts about this because I know that in May I have another appointment with my eye doctor, and we have a regular appointment with the eye doctor that goes on regularly. I know that they think that at some point, just because of family history, I may have glaucoma. Don't have it now, but it could come up because it is in the family history and all along those lines. And I know that part of your background is being a nurse, and I do know that people have their regular medical appointments, even though I will be honest, I am way overdue for that and everything in that space. But we don't oftentimes hear enough about going to get checked on our brain. So I'm just wondering, is that something that you think should be done on a more regular basis? And is that something that even doctors in general are paying attention to? Because when I think of people's medical appointments, I think of, like I said, the eye doctor, the dentist, and I'm definitely overdue for a dental appointment, and of course the regular doctor and the regular physical. I don't know that until there is a tragedy, and of course people oftentimes complain, and I know you even talk about it, about brain fog and all in that space. I don't know that until something happens. Like I actually lost a dear friend many years ago. They passed away, but they had an aneurysm. They had a brain aneurysm, but they were actually at a concert, and I remember hearing about the concert and then hearing that they had that aneurysm. I think it was a Sweet Honey in the Rock concert, and all in that space. And they lived for many years. And then a few years back, they passed away. I think they passed away before the pandemic, if memory is serving me correctly and everything. But I just wonder, are we doing enough just in terms of paying attention to that very important part of our body, the brain, which is like our computer system, if I can use the computer analogy and everything? But do we do enough in terms of medicine, in terms of paying attention to what's going on in our brain?
I think there is more conversation out there than in the past. So there's more information. There's like summits that, when all these healthcare professionals come together and give their opinions on stuff. And, so there's more information than used to be available. And I think that we all need to educate ourselves and seek out information wherever we can. There's more online, but unfortunately, there's a lot online, but there's more that should be known.
Right.
I guess I could say. How do we check it up? How do we check up our brains?
Mm-hmm.
There's usually not a great blood test. Now there's a blood test that, will say, okay, you have if you're doing the genetic testing, you have a tendency towards Alzheimer's because you've got these genetics. So yeah, you better pay attention then, if you know that. But most of us don't have that information. We don't know. So I feel like it's really important then to do what we can to protect our brains and to give nutrients to our brains.
Go ahead.
Well, part of that is just as I was talking about the concussions and what that can do. There's a lot of toxins. We live in a toxic world. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there's herbicides, there's pesticides. For many people, a lot of people can't tolerate gluten. It's very inflammatory, and so it can cause leaky gut. And then again, we can have leaky brain. So even without a concussion, we can have issues with our brain health. So what are some of the things we need to think about? Omega-3s. Our brain cells are made mostly of fat. Right. So we have to have good fats in our diet. And probably take supplements, the good omega-3 supplements to help us make sure we've got enough. because some people just, don't eat enough of the right foods. And so, but that is one piece that is very important for our brains. Also, getting enough sleep. Our brains detox at night when we sleep. The lymphatics, that portion of the lymphatic system in our brain, is detoxing at night. So we want to make sure that, we get to bed at a decent time, and, that we're able to get up and get moving. Movement, activity, exercise. We don't have to be, your hardcore athletes, but as we get older, even just going out for a walk,
Right.
Or people that do yoga, or the different things that can be done, because that all helps the blood flow to our brain. We need that oxygen in our brain.
No, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that, and I know one of the other things you talk about, and I know that it exists, it can exist in a variety of environments, but I was just wondering, do we pay enough attention to what is going on in our body? Because I do know for a fact that there are a number of parasites that exist in our body, and some of those parasites might be impacting not just our stomach, but our brains. But, there's not a lot of people that are buying special equipment to actually check into how their internal organs are doing. I mean, we see that all if we watch enough, as I do, medical programs and crime programs, but most of us don't have that kind of equipment at our disposal. So I was just wondering, do we pay enough attention to the parasites that might be impacting our health?
Personally, I don't think the average person pays enough attention to our health. I would talk about, say, you've got a car, how often do you get the oil changed? Oh, well, every 3,000 miles, or every, it's like, okay, how often do we stop and pay attention to what's going on in our bodies? How often do we change, the way we're eating, or, doing the things? Maybe it's taking some supplements to help digestion, because if we don't, it affects our entire life. It affects our immune system. It affects, as you were saying, we talked at one point about parasites. If our digestion isn't functioning properly, meaning we're not breaking down the foods, then that allows the food to start fermenting and, bubbling up. And that's what gastric reflux is. It's that we're not breaking down the foods well enough. We don't have enough hydrochloric acid, or some other things in digestion are off. If we don't have enough hydrochloric acid, if we do ingest parasites, because they're in the water, the food, they're everywhere. So if our body's working optimally, if our digestion is optimal, then we have a better chance of the body, the hydrochloric acid, killing those parasites so that they don't overgrow. It's really all about what's the proper balance. We're going to be exposed. For people who swim in a lake, there's parasites that are in the water. And we have many orifices in our body that, they can enter through. So there's so many ways that we can get parasites. You don't have to travel to a third world country. We have them right here. As much as doctors don't want to believe that, or talk about it. I don't say they won't believe it, but they don't necessarily educate people. So yes, parasites can have a huge impact, starting in our gut, but they don't stay in our gut. The parasites will move to liver, gallbladder, pancreas, lungs, brain. So it can have a big impact. In fact, there's a number of people who, I read a study, and now I'm not going to remember the numbers correctly, so I don't want to try to guess to it. But this study was talking about people who tended to have what may look like some brain issues, and after they died, when they did autopsy, they found infections in the brain in a very high percentage of people. Lyme and co-infections. There's a variety of infections that can go to our brains. So there's many things that can impact our brain health.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Before we get done, I'm going to bring in another guest that's also in the health space. They were actually the second person that came into the room and everything, and they actually talk about health equity. So before I bring in Athena and hear some of the things that she might have to say, both about what you've been talking about, as well as the nature of a more community-based healthcare system, I was just wondering, because one of the things that I think about with Brain Games is I am a big fan of phone games that test your knowledge and all along those lines. And I just wondered, do you find that those games are beneficial. I used to be a big fan of Words with Friends, and now I'm doing those kind of like one of these things don't match kind of type games and all along those lines. And a lot of times they are definitely testing my brain power and all in that space. But I just wanted your take on
I
some of these phone games that are trying to test your brain knowledge.
I think they're good for us. I think that I mean, not that we have to be on, our phones all the time and, looking down and all that, but I think anything that will stimulate our brains. Before we had access to those, word puzzles, crossword puzzles were a big thing, because it just kept us active. Yeah. The more we don't use our brain, then it's easier to kind of just lose. I'm going to say brain cells. That's not really what I mean, but the more we use our brains, the better the function, the more we keep it going, keep it testing, keep it moving. Just like the more we exercise, it's easier to keep exercising. When we exercise our brain, helps the brain. So yeah, I do think all that stuff.
No, that makes a lot of sense. My aunt, who I actually called earlier today just to check in on her because her husband passed away. I think that was about a year and a half ago, and all along those lines. But that being said, she is very big, as is my mom. They used to play crossword puzzles all the time, and now they're doing spinners, which is kind of like dominoes. But there's a number of things, and they've also dealt with Taboo and some of the other games that are very much keeping them active and engaged, even in their 80s. Because I want to say that all of them are in their 80s now and all in that space. But I'm gonna bring in Athena Hall because I know one of the things that Athena talks about, and she's probably been listening and going like, this is right up my alley and everything. Because I know one of the things that she talks about is fostering improved health outcomes within our healthcare system. And I know that there are a lot of people that are not pleased with the nature of the healthcare system. And I know that even here in Durham, North Carolina, which is known as the city of medicine, and that's where I'm based at, and all along those lines, there are still some hospitals that are more the for-profit model. And of course, we have a lot of the big pharma companies. GlaxoSmithKline is based here, as is, I think Pfizer has an office here, and a number of other people. But I was just wondering your thoughts around what definitely Sandy was talking about, and even what are the qualities of a great healthcare leader, because I know one of the things you talk about is community-based healthcare.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And wonderful hearing everything that you have to say, Sandy. The qualities of a great healthcare leader is to really uplift your team and to see the individual gifts that every healthcare worker has to offer, from a nurse to a custodial worker to the physicians. What are they bringing to the table individually, and how can I foster those gifts and decenter the industry itself and really foster a community of growth? So I feel like what's really important in our healthcare system is creating a new foundation of values. Currently, we have built our healthcare system on centering the industry, and every decision that we make is beneficial to the industry. And that's just the nature of the system that we built. So how can we build a new system, just start over, bring everything back to centering everything on the patient and the communities that we're serving and understanding their needs, and creating a system with a new set of values that really serves our communities.
That makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that, one of the things that crossed my mind, I'd love to hear from both you and Sandy, and I kind of alluded to it, there has always been this notion of there being inequality within our healthcare system, and that if you are poor and minority, you may not get the same kind of healthcare that other individuals do. So I was just wondering, is that still a problem, and is that something that you feel that we're doing a good enough job on improving? I know that even our current president has talked about the things that he wants to do in terms of, I think, that cancer moonshot to try to find a cure for cancer, but also trying to make it more equitable, some of the healthcare system inequities. And then we even saw that somewhat, because I've got friends that have even been on this show that talked about it within the pandemic and the way that the pandemic was treated in certain communities versus other communities. But I just wanted you two ladies' take on that.
Yeah, I feel like our healthcare system is now talking a lot about equity, and that's great. I feel like the conversation is going towards that. But as I said, I feel like our healthcare system is built on values that really aren't aligned with both the patients that we're serving and the healthcare workers. And so I think we really need to dig in and take a hard look at the history of our healthcare system, what it was built on, and how we can move forward to create more equity within our system and be able to really listen and understand what people need. So, and I think that means bringing them to the table and including everyone. So everyone from all walks of life, and giving them a seat at the table to empower them to say what they feel like they need in their community. So being able to represent everyone, I think is really important.
That makes a lot of sense. And this is for both, and I'll start with you, Sandy, but you kind of talked about it even with the brain power and all along those lines. But I know that during the pandemic, a lot of people started paying attention. I've got some friends and I've actually done some work with a program called the Road to the Apollo. We kind of use the Apollo model to bring issues of awareness to the veterans. And part of what we talk about regularly is the mental health that veterans have been going through. And of course, we know that even our own kids, I don't have any kids of my own, but I've got 2 nephews that a lot of them have been facing a crisis in mental health and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, how do you feel that we are doing in terms of addressing mental health concerns? Because the brain is part of mental health. And I do know that a lot of times we now have that new number, 988. If you are listening, you've got some issues in terms of your own personal care, and definitely in terms of wanting to be protected and living and all along those lines. So if you've got something that you need to address with that, and even if you're thinking about hurting yourself, that is the number to call, 988 and everything. But I just wanted your take on how we are doing in terms of treating folks that are dealing with various mental health crisis. I know even here in North Carolina, around the globe, we've got folks that are dealing with homelessness, and part of that is dealing with mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I am, Athena, I was really happy to hear what you were saying, because I do feel like there are so many people that get left behind. I did clinical nursing for a number of years, and I would have a hard time doing it now, because I think it's just the times are different. We were allowed to focus on the patient. And I'm not saying that they don't in healthcare, but I believe we had more time. Now the caseload of each nurse is higher, I would imagine, and the people that are coming in are having more challenges, whether it's mental health, whether it's, physical. But because people are waiting longer to come into the hospital, mental health, again, it brings me back to some of the things I was saying earlier. If our gut isn't healthy, and how many people have really good gut health, then that affects our mental health, because the microbiome, the bacteria in our gut, are critical for the brain. Are they getting the proper nutrients? Do our doctors talk about the fact that if you're deficient in B vitamins, then there's a higher incidence of anxiety and depression? So what other kinds of things can we do in education, or maybe some supplements? If we can't provide the healthcare they need, well, we should be able to provide that healthcare. But what else can we do to help people with their mental health, with their physical health? We need to do more, in my opinion. We need to do more preventative, as well as figuring out how in those communities that are underserved, what else can we do? I know that, where I live, there's a huge homeless problem in most cities nowadays, because the pandemic, again, took down a lot of people in terms of their ability to work. It knocked out a bunch of small companies. So a lot more people are struggling now. And if we could put together even more community centers for a lot of these people, places for them to go to get the help they need in the community where it feels safer, and to get supplements. I know whenever I've got supplements, that's why I've got this up. I've got panels of supplements behind this panel, but shelves. But if I have anything that's still good, but it's getting close to expiring, I take it and donate it. So that these people can have access to basic supplements that will help their health. So go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, I really agree, Sandy. I feel like we need to focus more on providing community-centered mental health care. And currently, our healthcare system is so good at crises and emergencies, and that is one of our strengths. We can keep people alive and in their good physical form, but we're not as good at addressing the preventative care and keeping them healthy. So if we had community health workers coming to people's homes, and there's a program where a community health worker will visit somebody in their home once a week, and it really reduces their sense of isolation and loneliness and improves their overall health. And if we had a system that looked at the social determinants of health, looking at their housing situation, their food insecurity, and anything else that might be contributing to their overall health, those are upstream causes of how they got here today. So looking at all of those things could significantly impact people's health and keep them out of those crises.
Because one of the things I know we've got here actually during Kwanzaa, which was back in December, I was actually on a panel, and I know that it is a national program, but we have HEART here, and that is actually people that respond to crises, whether that is domestic abuse or whether that is other kinds of abuse that the police officers aren't necessarily trained in. So these are people that are actually trained in crisis management, but also trained in certain health situations that the doctors aren't always trained in. So that, like I said, I know that HEART is a national, I think it might even be an international program, but that has definitely been implemented here, and they seem to be doing quite well, because sometimes people are put in that situation, even to what you were saying, Ms. Hall, and everything, where they are not able to address it if they are coming from a non-community based situation. But one of the things I'm concerned about, I don't know your thoughts around this, is that I grew up in rural North Carolina, and I know that there used to be a medical center there, like a community kind of medical center, HealthCo, and I'm not even sure that HealthCo still exists. I need to call some of my friends from back in my old hometown and see if it exists, but I do know that here in Durham we have Lincoln Center, and it is still thriving. It was actually a minority hospital at the time of segregation, and now it is a health center and all along those lines. But I just wonder, as a advocate of community-based healthcare, do you think that we are doing enough to maintain these kind of hospitals? Because I know a lot of hospitals, unfortunately, are very, as I alluded to earlier, corporate driven, and they're very for-profit driven. So I just wondering, do you think that we're doing enough to address the need for community-based hospitals and community-based care?
I definitely don't think that we're doing enough. It's not a priority in our healthcare system. We do focus more on emergency care and hospitals. And I think our focus needs to shift and priority needs to shift. If we really want to have healthy communities, we need to really center our healthcare system around the communities that we're serving. And instead of bringing them into doctor's visits and making them have all these tests, and when they're already struggling, coming to their homes, asking them what they need, addressing their needs, I think all of that will lead to a much healthier society that will spend so much less money on people coming into the hospital and on medications and on all of these other interventions that we have. So I see the future of our healthcare system as having less hospitals and more community-based health interventions.
That makes a lot of sense. Everything. I'm gonna bring in another guest who has actually done some amazing things, even at a relatively young age. At least I consider it relatively young, and all along those lines, because Bradley is coming to us from Canada, and Bradley has actually planning to go to the Olympics, and apparently he's trying to do this at the age of 37, and he's also made it a background with his scientific background to become an astronaut. So it looks like you're going to pay for your own way to go up there and all along those lines, but it does look like you are one of those folks that is not letting things stop you from pursuing your goals. And all along those lines, I heard that you were even doing some amazing things, including running in the Iditarod and all in that space. So you went on a grueling 250-mile run across the Sahara Desert, and you also swam across the English Channel, and definitely have swam the Denali, and like I said, definitely have done the Iditarod, which I know is not a non-grueling race because I've never been to Alaska, but I've heard about that 1,000-mile race, and it's kind of like that hot air balloon. I don't know that I'd be trying to run with all those dogs and everything, but for those of you that are up to that challenge, more power to you and everything. But I just wondered if you could share a little bit about your journey, Bradley. You're on mute right now, and just let us know a little bit of the things that you've got going on in that space, and even some of your determination, because you are definitely one of those determined individuals. You're still on mute. I don't know if you can hear me, but he's on mute and everything along those lines. While he's getting that straight, I'm gonna bring in Mike as well and everything. But one of the things that I know you talk about, Athena, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is the notion of being and I consider myself as one as well, being empathetic. And definitely that is a thing that I think we all here are trying to do, is be empathetic in that way and everything. So if you can talk about the importance of empathy, because I sometimes think that we don't pay enough attention to that part of our lives, is the notion of being empathetic. And I'm sure Sandy's even got some thoughts around that as well, because I know that the brain, sometimes we're neglecting that part of it. We're not being as empathetic. So Athena, if you can share a little bit about the importance of empathy, even in healthcare and just in life in general.
Yes, empathy is so important. Emotional intelligence is, empathy is a component of emotional intelligence. And within emotional intelligence is also the ability to communicate how you're feeling, and to be able to really sit with somebody and listen. And all of those skills are incredibly important in healthcare, especially, so that we can understand our patients and be able to help understand what's going on with them, and address their needs in a even really more efficient way, so efficient and accurate way. So it would be hugely beneficial for our healthcare workers to prioritize emotional intelligence. In healthcare and in medicine in general, we really focus on the left brain and logical, analytical thinking, algorithms and protocols, and following these certain things, which they all can be very important, but we don't put much into the right brain, which is more creativity and emotional intelligence, being able to communicate how you feel, and those listening skills. So we need more of a balance in our regular life and in healthcare.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. Sandy, your take on empathy, because like I said, I'm a big fan of empathy, and I definitely am a big fan of that being an important part of our life and everything. But I just wanted your take on the importance of empathy, even in brain care and everything.
Absolutely. I think that when we can put ourselves in another person's shoes, so to speak, it not only helps us, but it helps them. So we're not separate, we're really one. And when we can touch that within ourselves, by having that empathy for another person. I mean, there's a lot of people out around now that are empaths, where we actually feel the other person's pain. We feel what's going on in society. And that can present its challenges, because I'm one of those. But having empathy for another person, sometimes even having empathy for ourselves. How many times do we just say, it's okay, I'm okay? So we've got our other people working now, it looks like. So
yeah. Hey, Bradley, your mic is now working and everything. So if you want to share a little bit about your journey, because I know you've gone on a number of things, you actually off mute. So if you want to get off mute again and share a little bit about what you've got going over there in Canada.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. Sorry, I was on mute there for a second. But what's going on in Canada? I'm the CEO and founder of an internet service provider over here called Purple Cow Internet. Our mission is to drive down the overall cost of internet here in the Maritimes. It kind of all started when I used to live down in the United States. I lived in Princeton and California, Arizona, Alaska, and Hawaii, and all those places, internet was like super cheap compared to what it is up here in Canada. So we're changing that now. And then outside of that, I consider myself kind of an adventurer, and I'm trying to accomplish some of the world's biggest feats with physical challenges. So I just finished the Iditarod a couple of years ago, which is this 1,000-mile dog sled race across Alaska with 14 dogs that are pulling you, and you work together as a team. And I'm currently training for the 2026 Winter Olympics in ski mountaineering.
Wow. What is ski mountaineering? Because like I said, I know that there's new games. As a matter of fact, breakdancing will be at the Summer Olympics this year. Never was a breakdancer, but I do know that that is something added and all along those lines. But what is ski mountaineering, and exactly what is the training involved in order to get involved in that sport? And I'm still fascinated by the fact that you're one of these folks that, because I know there's some of these professional space travels, and it sounds like me that you're one of those folks that is hoping to go on one of those space journeys and to actually kind of take Star Wars and Star Trek to reality and everything. So I'd love to hear about both of those.
Dude, my ultimate goal is going to space and building space hotels while up there, so that more people have the ability to go up there and enjoy space. But that's what I'm working towards. That's still like probably 10 years away. So I got to get there before that happens. But great question around ski mountaineering. It's not a super popular sport. It's definitely gaining in popularity. And the fact that it's going to be in the Olympics for the first time is definitely going to help fuel that. It has different disciplines, but the discipline that's going to be popular within the Olympics is something called a sprint. So basically you have a set of skis on your feet that are kind of a cross between cross-country skis where the heel flexes and the boot flexes, and a downhill ski. And you put the skins in the bottom, 3, 2, 1, go. You race as fast as you can up the hill, both 70 meters, and you're racing against people. And along the way, you're kind of going around different obstacles. You have to take your skis off, throw them on your back, run up part of the hill, put your skis back on, get to the top, and then you ski down through gates. So it's very technical, and you have to have a huge VO2 max as you're going through it. I'm 37 years old. So the fact that I'm picking up skiing basically 2 years ago to try to go to the Olympics, I have a huge uphill battle, but I tell you the journey is what makes it worth it for sure. And competing against these guys that are half my age. So bring it on.
So you're ready to take them on and all along those lines. I have to ask Sandy, and I have to ask Ms. Hall, Athena, as well, if he manages to build a space hotel up in space, because he said it's 10 years down the line, will you be one of those folks that will be trying to make that journey? Because I know that Sandy mentioned being and wanting to go in the hot air balloon, but I don't know if you have any desire to go to space. So is this one of your dreams as well? And will you be trying to go in that journey with him should he get these space hotels up and running?
I don't know that I would, but what I love though is when you hear the astronauts when they're up in space and they see Earth, how spiritual it is for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is something pretty amazing about more than what's right here in this body. You know, although you've worked your body really hard, Bradley, you push yourself to the limit. So that's great. And that means your brain is also pushing to the limit. You know, you keep moving, keep going on. So
what you're talking about is super powerful. Like, oh, sorry. I think it's called the overview effect. Like so many astronauts or people go up there and become an astronaut and they look down at the Earth and you realize probably pretty quick that everything you know, all the people you met in your life, all the things you've ever done, your friends, your family, they're all in this little ball, and how that can change people, like, it's really powerful.
This is a question for both of you, both Sandy and Nathaniel, and even Mike, and I'm getting ready to introduce him as well, want to jump in and everything. But this notion, are we paying enough attention to being aligned? Because I'm a big fan. I hear people oftentimes talk about being aligned, and I think that there are four elements in my mind, which is the mental, the physical, the emotional, and whether you want to, I don't think of myself as overly religious, but I do consider myself to be somewhat spiritual. So I would say that spiritual is the fourth element, but I don't know that we are always doing enough to make sure that we are healthy in all four aspects. It's kind of like what I was talking to Sandy about. I don't know that even our doctors pay enough attention to what's going on in our brains and all in that space. So I just wanted for everybody here, and definitely like Sandy said, you're doing a lot of great work. So I'm imagining, Bradley, that you have to make sure that all of those aspects of your life are aligned as you are doing that work. But I was just wondering, do you feel that we as a society do enough to make sure that we are being as aligned as we can be? I mean, you're never probably going to be totally aligned, but as aligned as we can be.
I do want to say that I would go into the space hotel. I'm a big adventurer, and I've been skydiving and traveled a lot, and all of these experiences have really given me like a bird's eye view of everything in the world and helped me to shift my perspective on life. So I love adventure, and I would definitely be up there. And in terms of being aligned, I feel that our healthcare system should shift towards looking at the whole health of a person. Currently, we look at the physical health, which is important, of course, but there's so many other components to our health. And a lot of those components actually contribute to our physical health. So if we're looking at all of the person and really addressing all aspects of their health, then that could really help them to be thriving and living a much healthier life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to introduce Mike, because Mike, one of the things that you've been doing is you've been definitely being an adventurer yourself, being a musician and all along those lines, but you're doing all of this while living with a chronic illness. And I think even when I reached out to you, I told you that my younger brother is facing his uphill battle with MS. And actually I lost an aunt to that disease as well, but he's got a very positive attitude about it, because I think that positivity is what gets us past a lot of these kind of things that we go through and all in that space. And you were even living in a COVID world with a immunodeficiency disease and a lung disease. So I mean, I can only imagine what it would be like going through the pandemic with a lung disease, because that is very much of a lung related health issue and everything. So Mike, if you can share a little bit about what you've been going through and even your musical journey and some of your own resilience as well.
Sure. First, nice to meet all of you. It's almost, as soon as Sandy started, I was like, man, I want to talk to Sandy, because when it was 2004. I do have an immunodeficiency. It wasn't diagnosed until January 8th, 2007, when I was 36 years old. But I had viral encephalitis at the age of 33. So I was not supposed to survive that one. People with regular immune systems have a it's a coin toss. And and by the time 2004 rolled around, my immune system was really depleted, but that was a journey. At the age of 33, my brain rebooted. There's a week that I don't remember. And then after that, it rebooted, and I relearned how to do everything. I relearned how to, first I established reality again. Then I learned how to think, how to speak, how to walk, how to connect with my body, all of it again. The brain, now especially, the brain is such a fascinating thing to me. I think it's like the most amazing thing in the universe, the human brain, and what it has achieved in our in our SUV that is the human body. I'm fascinated by it. Athena, in terms of healthcare, boy, I've spent most of my life in healthcare. My disease is called common variable immunodeficiency. I actually, about a year and a half ago, I did a TED Talk. I was blessed to do a TED Talk about my life with it and my journey through 12 years of some pretty rough times before I got diagnosed. So I have an intimate relationship with the healthcare system that, gosh, I sure wish I didn't have, but here we are. You hear lots of good about the healthcare system, the miracles of modern medicine. You hear how about it's a business, and all of it's true. But the fact is, I wouldn't be here without it. I wouldn't live at any other time, literally, because I wouldn't survive at any other time. Bradley, wow. I mean, yeah, you've done the Iditarod, and that's pretty cool and all. But until you sat in a room full of music majors and tried to play guitar, you got nothing. No, I'm kidding. That's amazing. And yeah, I'll go to space with you, man. I've
like
gone
that.
through enough stuff in my life. I'll go to space. Like, I'm not even supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to live past the age of 24. I'm 52 now. Life sure is a fun adventure. So yes, it is lovely to meet all of you. In terms of my relationship with music, it actually goes right into what we're speaking about right now with spiritual health. Clearly, well, we've talked about right brain and left brain, and what music can do for that. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge proponent. I could give you a checklist of 100 benefits of studying music and how it puzzles the brain and it keeps you motivated and activated and engaged, and it challenges you. And every time I read a challenging piece of music, I get that little hit of dopamine. All these amazing things that music do. But for me, it started many moons ago, back in the 80s, when I was a young kid, the youngest kid in a military family. Like a lot of military families, after dad retired, it fell apart. And it just so happened that all of my family, you know, my mom and my dad, they both kind of went their separate ways. My sisters had moved out, and I found myself home alone for weeks at a time at the age of 15, kind of raising myself. Nowadays, they call that abandoned child. And it is. I mean, no child should ever go to sleep for 2 weeks wondering where anybody in their family is. So I had too many opportunities to not get in trouble, because I was an order following kid and I was never a trouble seeker, but it could have had a lot worse impact on me than it did if I had not discovered Metallica, if I hadn't heard Metallica in 10th grade, and it saved my life. And that's when I bought that guitar right there and never put it down. And so that guitar really did, through the power of music, it saved me. It changed me. It gave me purpose. It gave me identity. So music, you know, capital M music, to me, it's a proper name. It's a proper noun. It has been the fabric of my life ever since. And so, you know, for 8 years or so, I'd never put the guitar down, was really, really talented. And this is before the internet showed you how to do everything. Got a BA in classical guitar on May 4th of 1996. And 1 week later is kind of when I start the clock on my 12-year medical nightmare, quite honestly, that was dealing with common variable immunodeficiency. 1 week after college, I spent all day in the emergency room, weak, very jaundiced. And then after about 12 hours, a very calm ER doc is saying words like hemolytic anemia and call your parents and say goodbye. Or actually, I asked him if I should call my parents and say goodbye. And he said that might not be a bad idea. So, you know, you're a 24-year-old kid and the doctor's telling you that you're not going to make it. That would happen 6 more times over the course of 12 years. Different diseases, sepsis, viral encephalitis, infected lymph nodes, some really nasty pneumonias. But for 12 years, you disappear. I just became the disease, and I struggled to stay alive every day. Hundreds of respiratory infections, very painful. So after diagnosis, life looks a lot different. So to kind of piggyback on the idea of spiritualism, I myself am not a religious guy, but I'm very spiritual because of, frankly, what I endured, the resiliency that I discovered in myself, and even just being a person who always loved academia and just knowledge and history and math and science and everything. I look at the history of the human race and I see that it wasn't that long ago we were much more in tune, much more in touch with ourselves, let alone, I mean, with the natural world, obviously, but even ourselves. So when I hear people talk about things that are woo-woo, I'm like, we should lean into the woo-woo a little bit, because that it got us to where we are. It seemed to serve us pretty well for 300,000 years. And so I'm a big fan of woo-woo. I'm a big fan of
woo-woo as well. Just really quickly, and I wanted to jump in and ask Sandy this question, because part of what you're saying, and I have lost a friend not that long ago that had a very positive attitude. So I think part of what goes on even in our healthcare, but I'd love to hear Sandy's thoughts and maybe even Athena's as well as yours, Mike, and everything. But I think that part of what has to happen, even when you are given those negative kind of prognosis by the doctors is you have to have a positive attitude. I kind of alluded to that's the way I feel my brother is. Even Michelle Gonzalez, who unfortunately passed away not that long ago, but I think she was given like 6 months to live, and I want to say she lived for like 3 or 4 years. And part of that is I believe that she had a very positive attitude and a attitude that she was going to live as much of her life as she could to its fullest, and all in that space. So Sandy, brain is very important to you and everything. So how important is it for us to have that connection to our brain?
Our attitude is key. We do not realize what great creators we are. I'm not religious. I am spiritual. And I used to work as a hospice nurse. So dealing with people at end of life as they transitioned, the things that I saw and experienced with people. But we are creators. Bradley, I mean, look at what you've done because you've had the attitude and the desire. So when I've worked with people in healthcare that have had critical illness or people who have had severe brain injuries, if they believe they can, they can. They may not get to 100% of where they want to go, but they may get to 98. So if we believe we're not going to make it, we may not, because we are creating our reality with our mindset. And so when we are constantly going back to the traumas of childhood and not able to heal those, that comes up at a subtle way that we may not recognize, but it's there. So we are amazing creators. And the things that Mike, you've shared, oh my gosh, and if you had the mindset the whole time, like, I'm just not going to make it, why bother? Why try? You wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, definitely not in everything. And speaking of people that are amazing, I've got the final guest I'm going to bring in. And I've got a question that I ask just about all my guests on this show, and I am just as guilty. But first, I want to bring in Autumn and have y'all learn about hers, because she's gone to 30 countries in 30 years. I'm already impressed because she's already traveled the world, and she has definitely gone that. And she was a flight agent and flight attendant and a travel agent and a photographer. So definitely going to bring in Autumn and learn about how she got to these 30 countries in 30 years and all in that space, and was doing that while you were a flight attendant. And I know the flight attendant work can be very interesting, because on the audio version of the podcast, I had a friend of mine that wrote a book about being a flight attendant, and she talked about some of the unusual things that took place on that. And I think she still lives here in North Carolina, but she even talked about on a trip as a service animal. So I was going like, that's just a little bit too scary that you're going to have a kangaroo on the plane and everything. But Autumn, who knows what other animals you have run across as service animals on the planes, and some of the fascinating things you've had as a flight attendant. So if you'll share a little bit about your life as well, because as I said, the dinner party is us just getting to know each other and meeting and learning about each other, as we're doing today. And it's these kind of fascinating conversations. So share a little bit about yourself in these 30 countries in 30 years.
Hello, everybody. My name is Autumn. Hopefully you can hear me correctly. Yes. Thank you so much for having me on. It's so lovely to meet you all. I am Autumn, and I live in Minnesota, and I used to be a previous flight attendant, a travel agent, travel design manager, and now I am a travel photographer. So I love to travel. It is everything that I love to do. I have a shirt and a dress that's all about the world. It's just like a whole thing. It's all about the brand. But so I just came out with a book, and it is called Traveling in Wonder. So each chapter is a different country. And then at the end of each chapter, I have photography that's from that different country. And it kind of talks about the different places that I've gone and I've been, and it talks about traveling solo. It talks about traveling with people. And then it also has an overarching theme of what it's like to have anxiety and how to deal with having a anxiety disorder, and with also traveling around and how to incorporate not trying to have a panic attack when you're on the road or if you're traveling all around. And so that's just a little bit about me. I had a goal to do 30 countries before I turned 30. I also had a goal to go to all 7 continents. I made it to 6, but you can probably guess which the last one is that I didn't make it to. And I also had a goal to go to all 50 states. And I'm missing 2. The 2 that I'm missing are Idaho and Wyoming. I don't know why. I could just drive there, but it's just something that I have yet to do. So, that's just a little bit about me. And it was really, I'm so sorry.
No problem. You did good. I appreciate it and everything. You actually alluded to something that I talk about often, and I love to hear everybody here in the online dinner parties thoughts around this, because one of the things that I talk about quite often, and like I said, I'm just as guilty. I'm still at the age of 62 in that single space and all along those lines, but it's not just in relationships, it's also in jobs as well. So one of the things I oftentimes talk about is the notion of the imposter syndrome and this notion of us being our worst enemy. And I'm sure Sandy's got some thoughts around that as well. So I just love to hear everybody's thoughts, because I know that whether it is relationship based or jobs, because there's literally been jobs that even in the arts that I have not gone for, because I was having that whole little conversation with my brain going like, well, if I go for the job, they're not going to accept me, or they're not going to give me the job. And then you have these whole back and forth conversations. And when you finally get the nerve to go ask the people about the job, they're like, oh, you didn't hear? Chad got the job. And I'm going like, oh, well, maybe I need to stop having that conversation with myself, and all along those lines. So I just wonder, so I'll start with you, Sandy, but I definitely want to hear from Athena. And Bradley, I don't think you have an inner critic, because you keep doing everything that you want to do. And I also want to hear if Autumn wants to jump on your space hotel and everything. But Sandy, your thoughts around this notion of the inner critic?
The imposter syndrome, I love that you brought that up, because as a professional working, and not just anybody that's a professional, but in my case, in my line, I didn't really experience it so much in the years that I worked in the intensive care unit, or I worked in different areas in nursing. It's when I started doing what I'm doing now and running my own business, and really working in an area where there's looking at brain health. There's doctors out there that have whole teams and all of that. And so I tend to want to compare myself to them. And I thought, no, wait a minute. I know stuff. I worked as an ICU nurse. You can't be stupid in doing that, and really learning about brain health and neurofeedback and helping with concussions. It's like, I still have to check myself, but it's less often because I'm aware of it. Mm-hmm. So when I pay attention and say, no, there's no one that I know of that's doing concussion care the way I do it, and I get phenomenal results with people. So it's like, and someone recently said, oh, Sandy, when I see what you've done in the past, 5 years, holy cow. It's like, okay, then why can't we see it for ourselves?
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's like, we see in the other people how phenomenal they are. Why don't we see it for ourselves? I'm getting much better. I'm much better at it, because every time I catch myself, I go, no, wait a minute. I know stuff. Mm-hmm. I can do this.
What about yourself, Athena? Because you've definitely been in that space of trying to get people to get in this community-based medicine. And I'm sure there are people that have even told you, don't go against the big guys, because you're literally tackling the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm sure there are people like, you're tilting it at windmills. There's no way that you're going to be successful because you're going up against the big guns. So I'm sure that you're getting it both from your own inner critic as well as the outer critic. So I just wondered how you deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely encounter imposter syndrome. I'm literally wanting to start a movement so that we can change the healthcare system from the inside. And that brings in a lot of imposter syndrome of like, who am I to lead this? And who am I to start this? Who am I to bring in sponsors and people to support this? And then also encounter people who are naysayers and trying to say that this isn't possible. A lot of people are really attached to the status quo because it feels comfortable. And so I'm making a lot of people uncomfortable in starting this movement. But I have to remember that I have a lot of skills and gifts that for me to hold those back and not share them with the world, that's depriving the world of those gifts. And anyone that comes into the platform and into the movement also has really strong gifts that I hope to uplift and make sure that they are able to share those with the world as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Bradley, what about you? I'm sure that you had people when you said you wanted to go run with the dogs, which is what the Iterati is, or that you wanted to build a space hotel. I'm sure everybody's like, you are not Elon Musk. There is no way that you can get this accomplished and everything. So how have you dealt with those naysayers and all along those lines?
In a lot of ways, the naysayers motivate me. I'm a super goal-oriented person, and I find that you can't start with a big goal. You have to start with like little goals and like build up your confidence as you start accomplishing them over and over again. And then you can, start setting even bigger and bigger goals. But to the point now where I'm just thrown out like, hey, I'm going to go to the Olympics. Like that's ballsy. And there's definitely people I talk to that are just like, yo, Brad, you don't even, like 2 years ago, you didn't even ski and now you're skiing. And like the chances you go to the Olympics is slim to none. Yeah, they're right. But it's like, at least I'm going after it and chasing it. And the imposter syndrome, like I think if it's in your lane and like chasing the Olympics, I don't feel any imposter syndrome. I'm just doing it. I'm having a lot of fun. But if I was going to go and start a movement like you, Athena, like that would be something scary as hell. And I would question like, hey, is this right for me? Am I the right person? And I find you'd have to lean on the people in your life to support you, like your friends and family, to tell you like, yeah, you are the right person. You got this. But without that foundation, it would be super hard to take on something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Mike, what about you and everything? Because I know that for a fact that you are in the music lane. I am a big blues fan, and you mentioned the heavy metal, not knocking heavy metal, because I definitely have some heavy metal and other music in my collection, because I have an extensive kind of love of music, everything from country and some heavy metal down to my favorite blues and jazz to R&B and a number of other styles. But I do know that you even, if I remember correctly, you even play as well. So I think you're even in a couple of bands or all along those lines. So what do you say? Because I'm sure some people are like, wait a minute, you're in heavy metal? You're into heavy metal? And a lot of times people associate heavy metal just like they associate rap and other music as a young man's game. But I've got, like I said, my dad's other half, his lady love, and they've been together for, I want to say 25 plus years and everything in that space. So it's not my mom, because they were together less than that. I think they were together about 21 or 22, but she is a dancer and is still dancing. I want to say that Linda is in her late 70s or early 80s and is still doing very much performance dancing and all in that space. And my dad is still biking and other things in his 80s. So definitely I think you can be active even if you're in your 80s and not even in your 60s as I am. But I was just wondering your take on what some people would call a young man's game.
Okay, so historically, like hard rock, yeah, it's a young man's game, young person's game. But the people who started it are now in their 70s and their 80s. For what it's worth, one of my master's degrees is in jazz. I love Black American music, jazz and blues. Forget about it all day long. Imposter syndrome for sure. Even after diagnosis and kind of got a brand new life at the age of 36. That's when I went back to grad school and earned 3 master's degrees in 5 years, and I did it while working full time and doing all kinds of really, really impressive stuff. I say that because people would say, wow, that's really impressive. You did that. For me, and I think this probably speaks for a lot of people, I didn't feel like that while I was going through it. And I only started to realize it many moons later. During that whole time, man, I was just holding on for dear life, because I was also trying to make up for 12 years of lost time, because those 12 years were stolen from me. I lost my ability to play. I lost music for 10 years, and then I finally got it back. I'm going to grad school with people that are, in their early 20s. I'm almost 40. So I absolutely felt like an imposter in terms of being a musician, but even just being a human being. I didn't know who I was. I was just a name on a driver's license. I was like, I've been common variable immunodeficiency for 10 years. I didn't have any idea who I was without it. So I've struggled kind of, and I would say realistically, I do to this day. I look at my resume, and sometimes I literally look at it because I have to remind myself that I'm not just the guy who's going, what the hell am I doing? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Every day, people will look at me and say, wow, you're really impressive. And I say, thanks, I guess. And I have to remind myself that just objectively, my accomplishments they suggest I'm an expert in my field. So when I lean into that a little bit more, I think Sandy said it too. It's like, yeah, I'm not as bad as I was. I'm a whole lot better at it now. And now I kind of look in the mirror and say, yeah, you are kind of a badass, Michael. But I mean, will it always be there? I don't know. But I'm getting better at it. I'm definitely getting better at it, for sure.
None of us know everything. Autumn, I know that a lot of times there are very much fields that are stereotypical. And actually, we were earlier talking about the medical field, and there's definitely a lot of stereotypes around nursing. There are a whole lot of stereotypes around flight attendants and everything. So I'm sure that even played to some of your imposter syndrome as well. So I just wondered, how did you deal with that? Because a lot of times folks are like, well, one, you get to go all over the world, like you mentioned, do all these travel and everything. But then there's this nature of it's quote unquote not a real job. I actually think it's a very hard job and everything, but a lot of times people want to kind of put it off as something that anybody can do because you're just kind of like maintaining the travel. It's kind of like the hotel jobs, but I have a great deal of admiration because I have friends that work in the hotel field for those folks that are in the hotel, including the folks that even change your sheet. So if you go to a hotel, don't forget to tip those people because they are doing you a service and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on that as adding into the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so for sure, I've definitely felt it before, especially when I first had this idea that I wanted to be a flight attendant because I had always dreamed of being one ever since I was a little kid. And then it's so crazy how much flight attendants have to go through that you don't realize on a day-to-day basis that they are trained in so many different things. And when I flew to my first initial interview, it's an 8-hour interview with 60 other potential flight attendants, and they sit you through 8 different interviews, an hour each, and they only pick 5 names from those 60. And I was the last of the 5, which I did not think I'd get in. Then when you go into the actual flight attendant training, every week you are given a test. You have to pass the test with 90% or higher. I had someone in my course who had a test that was a 89.5 and they would not let her through and she had to go home. And it was 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and you would go through, learn how to fight fires in the cabin, evacuate a plane in less than 90 seconds. You'd have to learn how to do CPR, all medical training. You would also have to learn how to, what to do in case of an emergency over the water, evacuate in a water emergency. And then there's also a whole section that's on how to survive in the wilderness if a plane crashes and you are set in a place. We had to go through all these drills that we're learning about, things that I never thought that flight attendants would know about. And not only that, but every year flight attendants have to go back and get retrained, and then they have to pass those certain tests. And if they don't pass the test with the certain percentage, then they are let go from the airline company. So it is this extremely strict regimen that flight attendants have to go through. And every week when I was going through it, I was like, all right, God, I'm going to leave. This is my time. I'm not going to pass because this is just it's not going to happen. And then every week I kept on passing and I kept on going through the test. And it just felt, I don't know. It's seriously one of the craziest things I've ever been through. But now
just really quickly, because I've always wondered this and I don't know the answer. So I'm going to ask, since I've got a flight attendant. I could have asked it when I interviewed that other flight attendant. But is it true that flight attendants also have to have at least a basic knowledge? Not saying they have to have the total knowledge, but at least a basic knowledge of how to fly or land the plane, because I think that they might even have to do some knowledge within, at least some basic knowledge within the plane itself. I know that there are pilots and backup pilots, but I'm thinking, and I don't know the answer, do flight attendants also have to have at least some basic knowledge of flying the plane as well?
I believe that we did. But I also there was a lot of pilots that we worked with, and the pilots would always be like, do you want to sit in the spot? And then we'd be like, yeah, I want to sit in the spot. And then they would teach you how to, this is how you do it. But, it's like one time that they talk about it when passengers are going in and out, and you don't really, it's not like sitting there and studying it. But that also could have happened, you know, when you're just going through it. I think in my mind, there's so many things that I've touched up on that it's hard for me to remember everything.
That makes a lot of sense. Just out of curiosity, what was one of the places? And I mentioned I was going to ask you for in terms of Bradley's Space Hotel. Would you go to a space hotel and all along those lines? And what was one of the countries that you most admired that you wish that you could go back to? Because we heard people talk about some of their trips and everything, but where is some place that you really enjoyed going to and you wish you could go back to?
Yes, I would definitely go to the Space Hotel. I think that would be awesome.
Wait.
And then the second part is actually, Sandy had brought this up earlier, and then Bradley had also touched up on this. But I went to Norway for my honeymoon, and we went dog sledding and mushing in the thing. And I got a concussion on my honeymoon while I was mushing, and my husband was up on it, like holding it. And then you had the row of dogs, and I was inside of it, and my head slammed on this wooden board, and I got a concussion on the last day of the honeymoon. But even though that happened, I still think Norway 100% is my favorite country.
Wow.
What about the rest of you? And we still got about another 15 or 20 minutes to go and everything. But there is a question I ask everybody and all along those lines. But what would be a place that you would go to if you could go anywhere in the world? So I'll start with you, Sandy, and go around robin. But what is a dream destination of yours?
Oh man, you know, one of the countries that I went to that every place within that country I absolutely loved was Italy, and was never ready to leave. So I love Italy. I would love to go back to Italy. And there's parts of the world I haven't seen, so I'm sure there's others that would be amazing. But I also loved Africa, and I would go back to South Africa in a heartbeat.
You know, glad you mentioned that, because I've got a friend of mine. He's actually the current mayor here in Durham, but he and his wife owned a Zimbabwean restaurant as well. So Zimbabwe, Kenya, which is another friend of mine that have a Kenyan restaurant, has been on my list. And there are some Latin American countries, such as I have a friend of mine that is a professor, and he used to go regularly with his students to Belize, and he's told me wonderful things about Belize, as well as I've had some other friends that have visited Colombia. So that's some of the South American countries that I like to go to and everything. What about you, Althea? What are some of the places that you would like to go to and visit as well?
Yeah, if you had asked a few months ago, I would say Greece, but I got to go in November. So Greece is my heritage, and I still want to explore a lot of Greece. But I would say the top place is the Patagonias in South America. I really want to hike through the Patagonias and see the mountains and just be in that adventure and see just such a pristine natural environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Bradley? You've already gone every place. You're trying to build this space hotel, but there's got to be some place in the world that you haven't gone to that you want to go to, even though you're in Canada right now.
Totally. I feel like I'm super fortunate. I've traveled a ton, but the first thing that popped in my head when you asked a question is North Korea. I think that'd be so badass to like run around there and safely leave, of course.
But that makes sense. Everything. What about you, Mike? What's some place that you like to go to?
Okay, so I always tell people that if I wasn't a musician, or maybe in another life, I would be a European history teacher. I'm absolutely obsessed with European history. So Sandy and Athena, just both of you stole my thunder, because I thought Italy or Greece, because of Rome and ancient Greece. I'm like, I would just love, plus the Mediterranean. Come on, the weather, forget about it. So just for everything, just around the Mediterranean, I could be there and die happily there.
That makes a lot of sense. Definitely, earlier Audium mentioned it. It's something that I talk about regularly on the dinner party, and she mentioned that she got married, and I guess that wasn't that long ago, and everything in that space. But one of the things I'm oftentimes curious about, and I've said that I'm still in that single space, but I've got multiple jobs, so I know that I'm not the best person with work-life balance, because sometimes I'm trying to figure out how we can have a 28-hour day, even though there's actually only 24 hours in the day, because sometimes I'm trying to spread the various jobs into their compartments and all along those lines. Don't even talk about trying to add a social life into it as well, even though I do try to sneak that in there. But I was just wondering, I'll start with you, Sandy. How do you do that work-life balance and everything, and how do you accomplish that? So I'm thinking you might have that work-life balance issue as well, but I just wondered how you manage to get that work-life balance.
I am working on it. Years ago, it was much better at it than I am now. Right now, because I'm, growing this business, and I'm actually shifting the way I do things because I'm used to seeing patients one-on-one.
Right.
And we talk about guidance. I've had spiritual guidance along the way, and I'm being guided now to do more online so that I can help more people, the one-to-many versus just people coming into my office. So my balance isn't great right now because I'm learning. I'm 64, almost 65. So I don't have the technology, and, I'm learning how to do stuff that I have to do in order to make this happen, and hiring people to help. But so right now I've got a lot going on, but that will shift. That's why I'm trying to change the way I do things so that I can help more people and have more time for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
So I'm just trying to get in a massage now and then at this point. That's not enough. So I'm working on it.
Understood. And those massages can be very important. Before I get to Althena and everything, I was just wondering your thoughts about, because you kind of alluded to it, Sandy, the importance of being connected to your ancestors. Because I'm a big believer that my ancestors even helped me guide my life and everything. I have a grandmother that passed away way back in the 80s, but because she was a librarian and a trailblazer as a librarian, as well as my good friend Baba Chuck Davis, who died several years back and everything. So one more recent than the other, but I feel that they both still kind of helped me guide on this path, even and now and everything. So just wondering, how important is it for you to have that ancestral connection?
I think it's very helpful. I think it's important to understand where we came from and what our ancestors went through for us, not literally knowing it was for us, but my ancestors came across the Oregon Trail, and so it's like, okay, what did they go through? Thank you. You've helped so many, but being in touch with that. And I know that I wasn't going to bring this up, but when I do energy work with people, energy healing, because I'm an empath and I hear telepathically. And when I'm working with somebody, oftentimes their dead relatives will come and want to speak through me to them.
Yeah.
And I'm open to that because I see how healing that is for the people I work with, for the patients that I'm working on. When maybe they had an unfortunate relationship with their father or something, and he comes in to say, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think it's just very helpful to just always remember, sometimes there's trauma related to that. So we need to, be aware of that. But our being in understanding and in touch with our ancestry, I think is really powerful.
Definitely agree with you on that and everything. What about yourself, Althena? How has that work-life balance helped you out and everything, and how are you maintaining that work-life balance? Because even as Bradley said, you're not just trying to run a business, and definitely not knocking that, because definitely that's what I'm doing. It's what Sandy's doing, but you're actually trying to lead a movement. So I'm going like, she's trying to be like the Malcolm X or the Martin Luther King of mental health and all in that space. But I just wonder how you do that work-life balance while running and leading a movement.
Yeah, I have many passions, and I try to focus on just a few things at a time so that I don't stretch myself too thin or scatter my energy everywhere. And that's taken some diligence and practice. And I really prioritize my sleep. Even in medical school and residency training, I got 8 hours of sleep almost every night. And for me, that helped my performance and my relationships and like so many aspects of my life. So really prioritizing rest and sleep and paying attention to what am I really wanting to focus on in my life at this moment, and not doing too many things at once.
That makes sense. Bradley, you're doing everything underneath the sun, and then some things that even aren't underneath the sun. So how are you managing that work-life balance? I don't know if there's a significant other, but how are you managing that work-life balance?
Dude, my work-life balance is shit. Like it's trying to squeeze everything in. It's impossible. And I feel like putting too much pressure on yourself to try to make sure you get everything in and it's all balanced is sometimes a little bit unrealistic. I think the key that I find nowadays that really helps me, and maybe it helps some other people too, is being able to work remote. So it doesn't matter where I'm at. As long as I got a laptop connection, I can put my 8 hours in, and 6 hours, 5 hours, 20 hours, whatever it is I got to put in, get that done. So I'm always checking that box. Last year I lived in Europe and I was solo the whole time for 2 months. And this year my wife and 2 dogs came over with me, and that was so helpful. It was like heavenly. So I think trying to travel with the people you're in love with and that's important in your life is a way to do the balance as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Mike? How do you do that work-life balance and everything in that space?
Okay, so well, my work is teaching music and guitar. So luckily, my favorite thing is what I do. And actually, it's a lot like Sandy in that I'm also transitioning from one-on-one, which I've done since 1996, into group teaching, hence Strasbourg Guitar and Music Academy. That's what I'm building right now, going completely online and really stepping up into something much more. But I'm working on creating this business. Well, that's also kind of play for me. That is my life and it is my work at the same time. So in that regard, they're kind of balanced all the time because my work is my life and vice versa. Kind of what Bradley was saying about the alone time when COVID hit, especially with my health issues, I spent about 4 years just in complete solitary. So my balance, it was a little skewed mentally. So to say work-life balance, I think that's an incomplete picture because like work and life, it's like, well, what does life actually entail? Because there's the mental part of your balance, there's the spiritual part, everything, right? So there's a lot of plates or like plates to keep spinning, or balls in the air, so to speak. I think I'm doing pretty good right now, probably because at the end of the day, what I do to make money, my work is my life. And it has been since I've been a teenager, and I lost it and I got it back. So every day I'm super grateful, not just to be alive, but I have to pinch myself that people pay me really good money to show them how to do my favorite thing. So in that regard, it keeps me balanced. It keeps me at peace. So even when it's a little lopsided, inside I'm at peace. So I guess that's my answer.
That makes sense. Autumn, what about you? How do you do that work-life balance? I do have to teach you because you mentioned being from Minnesota and all along those lines, and I alluded earlier to being a Golden Eagle fan, meaning that I spent some time in Milwaukee. But even before then, way back in the Fran Tarkenton era, I have been a diehard Vikings fan. So I'm a longtime Vikings fan. I know that we just lost our quarterback to Atlanta. Now we got to figure out where the team's going to go. But just wanted to let you know that I'm a diehard Vikings fan, have been all my life, and I've still got faith that we're going to make it back to the Super Bowl and eventually win one, since I know we went 4 times and never won one. But I still got faith, and I was a longtime fan ever since the 70s, and I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm one of those fans that stuck with the team and will stay sticking with the team. So been a Vikings fan. My brother teases me because ironically he's a Bears fan and a ex who is not. We've lost touch, so it's definitely an exit at this point in everything. Used to be a devout Green Bay Packers fan. So you can only imagine what the family outings used to be, and all along those lines, when you got my brother Malik is a Bears fan, me as a Vikings fan, and then Janine, who is the ex, being a Packers fan. So yeah, it was some interesting conversations and everything. But yeah, I'm a diehard Vikings fan. So I still got faith, and I know you're in Minnesota, so you're a Vikings fan as well.
Yes, that probably is really crazy at holidays. I can somewhat relate. But I would say for me, it is a hard balance, especially because I bring my work with me everywhere. I'm always working, and I struggle that when I come home from work, then I continue to work on my laptop. And even if I'm watching TV, I still am doing something. And it's to the point that my husband is like, you are working too much. You need to not work as much. But also in the same realm, kind of like Mike is, I love it. I love everything that has to do with travel. I love being a photographer. I love learning how to create a small business and knowing what that entails. And now being an author, it's just really amazing. So I feel really lucky, just like how what he said is I feel really grateful for being in this spot now that yes, it's work, but it's also like, this is really cool stuff. Like I'm sending emails to really like amazing people, networking with people that I would have never met if any of this wouldn't have happened. And so just kind of like making that become my reality has been a really amazing experience. But I also am always on my laptop. So it's twofold.
So I can relate. Like I said, I'm actually been on the laptop doing the educational work earlier today, doing some of that scoring, and we'll be going to the Cultural Arts Center in about another 15 or 20 minutes. And all along those lines, I can guarantee you that when I get there, we'll probably be unplugging the speaker so that it doesn't make that much noise, the work that I'm doing, and all along those lines. But I'll probably be on the computer even while I'm at work and everything. But as we're going to wrap up and everything, and I'll start with Sandy, and all along those lines, there is something that I ask everybody. I'm going to go round table, starting with Sandy. And one of the things I get everybody to do is, like I said, this is a global network. Pod TV is Nick and Kim Calhoun put this together. Nick being a pension attorney and Kim being an engineer by trade, but I am a big fan of message of positivity. So that's something I get to do on all these online dinner parties. So I'm gonna go around in a round table, and if y'all can tell your message of positivity for our global community, and also in folks, how folks can reach you, and any other message that you might not have gotten out on this particular hour and a half, and all along those lines. And I can tell you that I have thoroughly enjoyed all five of you, and I hope that all five of you will come back to another dinner party at some point or another as well. But I'll start with you, Sandy, if you can tell folks how they can reach you and any message of positivity. And then, like I said, because of that work-life balance, y'all might see me go off camera for a minute, because I've got to throw on those things called socks and shoes, because definitely have everything else ready for the getting to the work and everything along those lines. But I got to throw on the socks and shoes so I can make it to mass transit. So, Sandy, I'll start with you. And if you want to give a message of positivity and how you can be reached, and then go to Althena, and then go around Robin.
Perfect. Great. So, my message is there's always hope. And we've come through a 3-year period of time where it didn't always feel that way, where it was overwhelming and the information was difficult. There's always hope. And just remember that we are the creators of our life. So keeping the attitude, and just recognizing and reaching out when you see somebody that needs a hand. I think it does more for us, well, as much for us as it does for them. So, and then my other message is to reach me. brainworksforlife.com is my company. And I've put together, because this is Brain Injury Awareness Month, I've put together a masterclass for concussion care and brain health in general. And that's going to be March 20th and 21st from 11 to 1 Pacific time, both days. And you can just go to the website, brainworksforlife.com, and register there. And then we'll send you a Zoom link. So I'll be going into brain health much more than I was able to today, and talking about, the effect of concussions, but just the kinds of things we can do for our brains. So I invite everybody. It's a free online masterclass. Athena.
And definitely hope that folks will do there, and all along those lines. And I was going to tell you that we also do our hourly news program as well. So I have to get you an invitation to that as well. And that is more focused on the news and all in that space. That's at 10 o'clock in the morning, which I think is 7 o'clock your time. But we do have Rick Rosner, who comes in, that used to be the writer for Jimmy Kimmel. So I do know that sometimes people do come in from the West Coast, even though it is much earlier, and all along those lines. I might be sending you an invitation to that as well, as we get closer to this and everything, because that is similar to this. It's a kind of a monologue that either I do or that Steve Rao, our host, does. If he's not available, then that's when I do it. But it's actually his role to be the primary host, even though lately it's been falling into my lap and everything. But then after we talk, then we bring in the guests. They get like about 15 to 20 minutes to speak on their issue and everything, and it becomes like a answer questions with people, including some from Canada, because I know Sasha Starr, who is of Ukrainian descent, but is a chess master, comes in, as does other folks, and they may have questions outside of those that me and Steve come up with as well. So definitely, hopefully you can all make it to that as well. But Althena, if you want to share your message of positivity and how folks can reach you, and anything that you would like to share as well that you weren't able to get to.
Yes. So I'd like to say that humans are incredibly creative, and we're capable of so much more than we can even imagine. And if we collaborate and we have a shared vision, we can do anything that we set our minds to. So I'm really excited about the future of healthcare. And my website is www.transforminghealthcareplatform.com. And you can follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Athena Lauren Hall, and Lauren is spelled Lorin. So I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on our healthcare system and what you feel needs to change.
And Bradley, it's your turn. And then, like I said, Bradley, Mike, and then we'll go to Autumn, and then I'll go out with a couple of PSAs. But definitely, like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hope that all 5 of you will make a return trip. But Bradley, I've definitely got to figure out whether I'm bold enough to go to that space hotel, because it's up there in space. I've got to figure out if I'm that bold as some of the other people have said they are and everything. But if you would tell folks how they can reach you and any message of positivity that you would like to share as well.
Yeah, I would have to echo a lot of what Athena's talking about, that anything we want to accomplish in life is totally there. One caveat I'd put on it, and obviously all of you guys are doing that, is when you do set your goals and whatever you do want to chase, to make sure you set that goal high. And how you know it's high is when you like talk to your friends and family and they give you like the kind of the scoff, like, what? Really? Shit. Okay. Like, that's crazy, but go for it, you know? Like that's really how you know you said it. But if your buddies are like, oh yeah, like that's cool. Like I just, I'm gonna go run 5K. Oh yeah, that's cool. Like, but you know what I mean? So like make sure you set that goal freaking high. Super happy to chat with anyone. Instagram's the place to find me. Just search Bradley Farquhar and I'll be on there.
Sounds good and everything. So I definitely appreciate that. Mike, your message of positivity and encouragement and any ways that you can be reached as well.
You bet. So I stole this from Mel Robbins' TED Talk when I did mine, but I'm going to say it now too. The odds of any of us being born, being who we are, ending up in the situation that we're in, all of it are 400 trillion to 1. So that sounds impossible. Basically it is, but it's not, because we're all here. So and it's so easy to say this because you can say anything, it doesn't mean anything, but if you can truly feel and just somewhat internalize the idea that you're not even supposed to be here, and that every day that you wake up is an impossible gift. If you can tap into it this much, that's a victory. Everything you do, everything you approach, the bad things and the good things. I know bad things suck. That's why we call them bad things. But there is a silver lining even in the bad things. If you weren't here, you couldn't experience them. And again, I know it's easy to say, but that's what I'm going with. In terms of contacting me, well, right now my web presence is being rebuilt as I rebuild my music school, Strasbaugh Guitar and Music Academy. But if you just find me on the socials, just look under last name Strasbaugh. Strasbaugh, which is not a very common name, just type in Strasbaugh Guitar on any of the socials, and you'll find me. Contact me. Love to talk to you.
Sounds good. Autumn, if you can share a message of positivity and hope, as well as how folks can reach you. And then, like I said, I think I'm going to make everybody hungry, because there is an African-American vegan snack place that is the PSA that I will probably close out with. So y'all will see this very delicious kind of confectionery, and it definitely does not look like it's vegan, but they swear to me that it is actually vegan. So every time that I play this, folks are like, that looks too good, and y'all are actually trying to torture me.
Perfect. The thing that I would say about positivity is that if you are anxious to do something and you want to do it, starting off small, even if it's exploring a grocery store in a town over that you've never been to before, or just doing something new, I think that it's really encouraging, because as Bradley said, it builds your confidence. So that way, when you do book the ticket, when you do book the flight, and you're nervous about traveling on your own or traveling abroad, you can feel confident in making that decision of knowing like, oh no, I got this, I can do it. And you can reach me on autumncarolyn.com, and it's Carolyn with 2 N's. I have also Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of those things. And then Traveling in Wonder. My book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all Walmart.com, all those different. It's online, so you can Google it if you're interested. But thank you so much.
No, I appreciate all 5 of you for being on. Like I said, I'm going to torture everybody with a little bit of this confectionery and all along those lines, and then I'll hit the end stream. But I definitely look forward to it. And like I said, it'll be re-airing several times on Pod TV. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and look forward to seeing you back in the near future, and definitely hearing some feedback from some of the folks that have been watching and listening on Roku and the various other platforms, including the YouTube channel, and all in that space. But y'all have been amazing guests, and I look forward to seeing you at another dinner party at another time or at some of our other shows as well. But definitely look forward. And like I said, I think I've tortured myself as well as y'all folks with this little bit of a confectionery commercial and all in that space. So we'll check this out. And like I said, I'll probably hit the end stream, and then as I'm walking out the door, I'll probably be asking y'all, didn't that torture y'all? And all along those lines. But let's check this out as we head out the door. But I definitely greatly appreciated all 5 of you being on, and we'll have another online dinner party a week from today. But I definitely appreciated all of you joining me on this particular day.
Hi, my name is Maria Jones, baker and owner of Very Vegan, a premier mobile bakery specializing in putting a plant-based spin on some of your favorite desserts. Inspired by my own personal experience with my journey with healthier eating habits, I was determined to make comparable items with desirable textures and great taste. We're always experimenting with different flavor profiles and expanding our menu. I enjoy my creative license as well as imparting ideas and requests from my customers. It makes for new and exciting items. Some of our customer faves are the specialty cheesecakes such as the banana pudding with homemade vegan vanilla wafers, strawberry crunch, honey bun, fruity pebbles, peach cobbler, and many others. We also offer moist, rich cupcakes, delectable cookies, decadent brownies, and scrumptious pound cake. Discover how amazingly delicious vegan can be. I am available for orders, or you can purchase my items exclusively at the Black Farmers Hub.